Welcome to Inside Games, the only gaming news show brave enough to still have fun playing Battlefield 2042. That's right, we still have fun.
Yeah, we do, weirdly. And because of that, we're kind of a dying breed, aren't we? Basically endangered, I think, if the game's player counts are anything to go by.
So this massively broken game clearly cannot catch a break, and maybe it shouldn't. In the weeks since our last report, DICE has delayed both critical updates and the game's first season of content, not to mention its developers disengaging from the game's subreddit entirely due to toxicity.
Most frustrating of all, sounds like nobody at publisher Electronic Arts learned the right kinds of lesson from the state of Battlefield 2042, according to an exclusive report from recurring leaker Tom Henderson.
Henderson reports in an article published February 15th on xfire.com, EA held an internal town hall meeting to review the performance of Battlefield 2042. Damn it, I wish I'd been there. That sounds awesome. As part of that review, EA Chief Studio Officer Laura Mila admitted that Battlefield 2042 is a miss for the company, saying that it, quote, failed to meet the expectations of our players and also clearly missed our own expectations.
Mila also went on to detail the combination of factors that led to Battlefield 2042 launching in the state that it did. Some of them are understandable. Others will be very difficult to not dunk on. We'll try our best, but I don't think we're going to make it through.
Mila addressed the game's buggy state at launch by acknowledging that DICE games typically launch with technical issues that are then fixed later. What a surprise! Who would have guessed? Essentially, they've made money off of launching buggy games in the past that are patched later, which they do every time with every Battlefield and Battlefront. So they expected it to work again, especially since apparently the bug count fell into an unexpected range for a DICE game.
Such a gross phrase. It's like the tolerable amount of rat feces in your hot dog. Ideally, it would be 0. Somehow we can't get there, though, so it's just an acceptable amount of bugs. Jeez. This strategy, EA's strategy, is stated explicitly by Mila here, saying, quote, DICE historically is very good at adapting games in live service, connecting with players, connecting with the community, and getting the game to the place players expect.
In supporting this strategy, Mila referenced comments from EA CEO Andrew Wilson in their Q3 2022 earnings call, who said, quote, DICE is the studio that has been able to do this a number of times now, because it has, and really go back and rebuild at the core and re-engage the community as long as we do that in conjunction with a committee. That's what that studio was so great at doing.
If I worked at DICE, I would hate hearing that. I would hate it.
It's true though, but they know that. DICE knows that too, because DICE has been doing it for years.
They have, but that's one of those like you clear your plate and they'll just fill it up again. So if EA forces DICE to release an unfinished game, but DICE puts in overtime, actually talks to the community and smooths things over, he's up there being like, yeah, okay, this can work. So it's, I don't know, it's crazy to me. It's crazy that they just say it in words. It's rare to get so explicit an acknowledgement of what finally turned into a busted business plan. They're basically saying it here. EA pushes out a game knowing that it's buggy, and then they rely on DICE's ability to actually talk with the community and engage with them and fix the game after the fact. That sucks. It sucks to put them in that position and then require them to sort of work their magic. At least it didn't work this time, and I say that for EA's perspective, not necessarily for DICE's, because it's not fair to put them in that position.
What's weird about this, though, is that DICE has done it every time. So it's like that where you're a really good employee, and you're like, well, no, I can do all this work in 8 hours, and your manager's like, okay, now I will rely on that. And your manager takes advantage of it. That's exactly what's happening here. EA takes advantage of the fact that DICE has been doing it for years. And I mean, it's weird. I don't know. There really is no blame here. I can't blame EA. I can't blame DICE. Like maybe they're both at fault.
Well, what's DICE to do in that circumstance? Aside from drop the ball? Like, if you're washing plates, you let one shatter on the floor, and then suddenly your manager's like, oh, maybe we don't have you washing dishes anymore. So who's to say? Yeah, it's tough because we'll never be in that room when DICE says, okay, we can do this, or they accept the burden that's been put on them. That would make this a different conversation, but it certainly doesn't sound good from the outside right now.
According to Mila, player expectations have changed, and launching a knowingly busted product with the intent to patch and fix later clearly doesn't really fly. Finally. It's been a long time.
Are you mad yet? No? Well, hold on, because the EA vortex of suck is about to level up into Nancy Reagan territory.
According to Mila, the Day 0 and Day 1 patches for Battlefield 2042 actually put the game in a decent state. Battlefield's fortunes flipped when Xbox surprise launched Halo Infinite's multiplayer. Because I remember everyone was so excited about it, and then Halo launched, and everyone stopped playing Battlefield and then shit on the game. With these games in direct competition, Battlefield 2042's flaws seemed far more glaring, considering that Halo Infinite found the time to include a scoreboard, didn't crash all the time, and it was fucking free.
I mean, not all of its modes worked. Big Team Battle wasn't there. And certainly people have brought up that Infinite doesn't really stack up against other Halos in terms of the content it launched with. But it wasn't 2042, that's for sure. It was pretty, smooth, ran well, you could shoot people. What's really frustrating and annoying on top of all this is, unfortunately, from the EA standpoint, she's kind of right about her analysis here. And it's not just hers, by the way. She's just the mouthpiece here, but EA is kind of right in their analysis. Knowing that from their perspective, EA did plan on launching a knowingly buggy game and then relying on DICE's ability to patch and smooth issues over, probably would have gone according to plan had not the internet been a lot more angry than usual, and then also Halo Infinite was there showing how it could be done.
It's really frustrating to follow this logic as consumers, because remember, this was a private town hall meeting with only EA employees. So naturally, they're only going to talk about it in practical business terms.
Yeah, they're not going to sugarcoat it like they do for us babies most of the time. Mila presented a few other factors that inhibited Battlefield 2042's development on top of just apparently not giving a shit that the game was unfinished in the first place. One of the largest factors is yet again the game's engine. Frostbite is just an albatross that won't go away. Apparently the Frostbite engine is so old at this point, according to Tom Henderson's sources, that a full 18 months of development were just dedicated to revamping and updating the engine itself to get it to a point where they could ship a game on it.
It's so funny because when I first started playing Battlefield 2042, I was like, why the fuck is this so broken? It's like they started from scratch. And I think they did start from scratch. Like, what? I was like, what? How? They had a whole Battlefield game there already on Frostbite. Whatever. This is frustrating in its own way, because Frostbite's been identified as the culprit in many EA flops, including one of the biggest bombs of all time in BioWare's Anthem. One has to wonder just how many games Frostbite will put in the ground before a better solution can be found. All we can figure is that EA wants to avoid paying any kind of licensing or royalty fees that might be associated with using like third-party dev like Unreal Engine, which makes a lot of sense, right? For EA, of course.
It's good business for EA to have, and gosh, I can't remember. It was in like the mid 2010s when EA said, guess what? Frostbite's our engine, baby. Everything we make is going to be on Frostbite. And I get from their perspective why they want that. They don't want to sign licensing agreements with Epic. And if you think you got this powerhouse tool under your studios, it's free, you've already paid for it to be made, you might as well use it. But yeah, it's been a nightmare. On to other notes that influenced development. It wouldn't be 2022 without some mention of COVID, of course, which Mila said added additional volatility into the project, concluding that Battlefield 2042 faced, quote, more new variables in development than we have ever experienced before. Dated engine, COVID, Halo. It's a perfect storm of shit, basically.
So where do we go from here? Unfortunately, the current state of Battlefield 2042 isn't really looking that great. The game has shed most of its active players on Steam, dropping from an average of 7.8K players in January 2022 to hovering just over 2K average players this week. In fact, average player counts in the past 30 days on Steam are higher for both Battlefield 5 and Battlefield 1 than 2042, which is, it makes sense because people are going to the battlefields that work.
Yeah, they've been patched, have a lot of content. Yeah, makes total sense. So nobody's playing it right now, but surely once DICE rolls out some patches and works their trademark community engagement, the game will turn around, right?
Hey, you know what? Anything's possible, Lawrence. We've seen it. No Man's Sky, we saw, and now even Cyberpunk having a little bit of a glow up after its current gen update this week, which, by the way, the game is better. We both played it. I enjoyed it a little more. But unfortunately, nearly every update to Battlefield has been delayed in recent weeks.
Yeah, and maybe that's ongoing issues with Frostbite. Who knows? Maybe it's just really hard to drag a scoreboard out of that thing. Whatever the reason, DICE delayed the 3.3 update, which will actually contain a revamped leaderboard scoreboard. It was supposed to come out in late February. It's now early March. Not the worst delay, but it's still a delay.
I really want to see who's on top of that scoreboard so I can be mad at them. I really want to see. And then say that they're a hacker.
Monstering text chat, son of a bitch hacker, get out of my server.
The game's first season of content, never fully detailed, but ostensibly including new operators and maps, has also been delayed to early summer, according to a blog post from DICE on February 1st. To be fair to DICE, though, this isn't really a delay, since they never really said anything about a release date for the season in the first place, which was wise. It does seem reasonable to expect that a season of content would launch either with or shortly after a multiplayer-only shooter, not half a year after. And this is one thing that I said over and over. I was like, if they're launching without a campaign, then they've got no excuses. It has to be good at launch, and boy, was it not.
Yeah, unsurprisingly, all these content delays haven't rehabilitated the game much in players' eyes. A widely circulated change.org petition, always my favorite when it comes to reported gaming news. This petition's asking for gaming refunds. It's reached over 200,000 signatures. It's a lot, it's a big number. Though to be honest, I don't think we see a refund practically happening in any way in the near future. The petition's organizer, listed as Satoshi Nakamoto, insert eye roll, indicated they would, quote, reach out to some of the best class action lawyers in the country to evaluate a case against EA and DICE at 50,000 signatures. Long past that, so it's possible this is happening. But I have to admit, somehow, borrowing the pseudonym of Bitcoin's founder doesn't really inspire confidence in me.
Yeah, there's really only one circumstance of a game publisher offering refunds for an underdeveloped game. That's actually CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk 2077. Given that EA is explicit with their strategy of launching a buggy game and then relying on DICE to turn it around after the fact, it's kind of unlikely that they'll suddenly be struck by such guilt as to offer full refunds for this Battlefield game. We figure the odds of a change.org petition prompting EA to suddenly offer full refunds for the game at about 0.
There is another way to get money out of them, though. The petition does mention a class action lawsuit, which is a bit more realistic when it comes to recovering money of some sort that is wasted on Battlefield 2042, but even then the odds seem very, very minuscule. Now, we're not lawyers, but we've seen a couple of class action lawsuits towards video game companies come and go. In these circumstances, there has to be an explicit promise of functions or features that aren't included in the resulting product.
Yeah, by our casual observation, EA and DICE, they didn't really promise any features that didn't make it into the final product. Mostly it's just frustration at understandably assuming a game with Battlefield in the title would launch with features and a content scope typically associated with the Battlefield brand. That probably doesn't constitute deceptive advertising.
Yeah, it's been really interesting because certainly the Battlefield subreddit, which we'll talk more about in a second, has trawled back through any shred of like marketing for the game, and honestly they can't really pinpoint the devs lying about anything, which is unique. So in that way, weirdly, EA actually did a really good job marketing this game because they didn't overpromise anything. They didn't promise much of anything in the first place. Unlike other class action suits that have actually gone through, I remember the classic one I always reference because I got $6 from it, is the Sony PlayStation one from a million years ago. The box had a bullet point saying that you could install other operating systems on it, but they patched that feature out. So it was a promised feature that was removed. Bam, boom, bam, you're entitled to compensation because you're paying for a product that doesn't do what it says it's going to do. 2042 didn't promise a scoreboard somehow. We all just assumed it would have it because it's a game that hopefully they would have enough pride in to launch complete. Who knows?
Amusingly, just to complete the comparison here, CD Projekt Red is also the target of a few class action lawsuits, but those are largely from groups of investors and not classes composed of game buying consumers, you and I. After offering a refund, there'd be no standing for a class action suit on behalf of consumers, since they could get all their money back anyway on a refund.
For the time being, it does seem that EA and DICE are still committed to continue development on Battlefield 2042, but then again, they did say the same thing about Anthem months after launch, only to have development roadmaps be continually delayed, reevaluated, revamped, and then, as far as we know, they just dissolved into the ether.
And it seems even DICE's ability to connect with the fan base has limits. Battlefield Global Community Manager Adam Freeman stated in both a Reddit post and on Twitter that he and his team will no longer engage with comments on Reddit since it's become a space, quote, where basic standards of civility can't be maintained. And, quote, there's no value in pretending it's a constructive environment. Boy, is he not wrong here. Freeman's post goes on to promise that both he and his team monitor all the Reddits daily for feedback and sentiment, and of course that will continue.
There's an internet rando that accused Freeman of ignoring constructive feedback, which is what always happens, right? To which Freeman reiterated that, quote, the suggestion that we ignore feedback is unfair. What's been stated is that I won't engage with it.
And this seems to be an unfortunately diplomatic move, as by our observation, those communities have turned so toxic that any developer post is immediately memed upon to escalate frustration and hostility. When that happens, often the best choice is just to be quiet and listen, since any input just fuel for the toxic fire. And Reddit is probably the biggest offender of this.
And to draw another comparison, I guess, the flawed games route. That's kind of what CD Projekt did. They clammed up. They stopped talking. They didn't even say that the next gen update was coming. They just launched it because they were tired of people taking everything they said and making it negative. So you just be quiet, work on the game, and launch content when it's ready. And it seems to be working for them. So hopefully DICE and EA can do the same here.
Freeman goes on to say that communication is still welcome on Twitter or links to any other platform that supports longer messages. So that's good.
Twitter's a little more face-to-face. You know, when you're writing something, you're saying it to the person. Whereas Reddit is just a bunch of dudes with like light beer sitting around in a circle just talking shit and riffing off each other. So different energy in those services for sure. But while current Battlefield developers are kind of tiptoeing around what they say online, understandably, Battlefield 3 and Bad Company 2 lead designer David Goldfarb kept it real in tweeting, quote, "I'm astonished that there were this many missteps, even knowing the obstacles from higher up."
Goldfarb points out a number of confusing design decisions noticeable at the top level, such as the lack of small infantry maps, 128 player support with no infantry accommodations, and maps shipping without detail art.
He suggests the best path for DICE at this point is to, quote, "make 2143 and go forward in time and reclaim their mantle of combined arms badassery that they built their legacy on."
It's never great when a previous designer pulls a drive-by on a current version of the game like that, especially when it's clear Goldfarb extends a lot of sympathy and understanding to his former co-workers at DICE.
Does raise an interesting question, though. Would anyone be interested in Battlefield 2143 after this launch, or really another Battlefield at all?
This is what we say, I think, on every episode now of Inside Games. If you didn't like 2042, don't buy the next product that DICE makes. Don't do it. You're encouraging them to make more money and make more products. So instead, stop. Get a refund. Don't buy the next one. If you don't want them to make a game, don't buy it.
I mean, from the sounds of it, EA is saying customers won't support this anymore. So that's a good sign. We'll see. It'll have to be a hell of a marketing campaign, Bruce, I think, to convince people the next one is the good one. And for that, they'll probably have to tug on nostalgia. Be like, hey, remember Bad Company 2? When 2142 came out 1 million years ago, it felt like a good mod. And so when they called this one 2042, I was like, wait a minute. It already felt like kind of the B list, and it ended up being that, which is unfortunate. So yeah, I think the 42 branding is probably going in the dirt after this, which means they probably got to do Bad Company 3, right? What cachet is left in the Battlefield brand?
That's the last one. You are correct. It has to be Bad Company 3, and they have to listen to Bruce Green and launch free to play. They gotta. They don't have a choice now. Like at this point they burned all of the cachet they had with fans like me and everyone else. So they gotta fucking do it. They gotta launch free to play, and it's gotta be Bad Company 3. They gotta do it.
Well, let's see if you can go 2 for 2. All right. Do you, based on Mila's description about this process that they've formalized with DICE of launching a buggy Battlefield game and then leaning on DICE to make it all good, since that apparently doesn't work anymore because audiences are more discerning now, do you think that means EA's learned their lesson? They won't push out an incomplete shooter in the future, or are they just going to wait a couple years and do it again?
I feel like they have learned their look. If I'm DICE. If I'm the head of DICE, I stop EA in their tracks because of Battlefront 2 and Battlefield 2042. Both of those launch with some of the worst launches I've ever seen in video games. And now DICE has 2 major examples to point back at and be like, please don't make us do this again. Like, please don't make it. Let us launch a game that we know is fixed, and we'll make it fucking free, or we'll give you a really great Bad Company 3 campaign. I think that DICE can use this as leverage to make sure it doesn't happen again. I hope they do. And if they don't, maybe they can go be independent or get bought by Microsoft.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame because we both know DICE can make incredible games when they have time and budget, which, and apparently they don't have to do years worth of renovation work on the Frostbite engine. So it's just frustrating from our perspective because I love Mirror's Edge. Been playing DICE games for over 2 decades now. And they have such an incredible talent across multiple genres and everything they decide to produce. So it sucks to have them almost intentionally put in this position by EA of like, you're going to launch this shitty game, everyone's going to scream at you, but you're going to make them happy because that's what you do. So yeah, it would be nice if maybe this incident, and especially since it finally hurt EA's pocketbook, maybe DICE can reposition themselves within the company. And let's hope that they're espousing for the kinds of games that we like, and they actually get listened to this time.
I love DICE. They are my favorite developer. I think them and Respawn are my favorite developer. I've been rooting for DICE for 20 years, and it just bums me out to see what's been happening. And I'm not saying it's happening to them either, because I think that there are people at DICE that working with EA. I think everyone's at fault here. So
Yeah, the market tolerated it for a while, and now it won't. So, and like we say, you know, it's not really. I mean, sentiment matters, but sales and expectations are what EA cares about. So finally, that one didn't go through. Praise God. Jeez, if 2042 had sold really well, oh my gosh, what a nightmare that would be. I mean, good for DICE, don't get me wrong, but the last thing EA needs is that tactic being validated again.
hey, make sure to subscribe to our channel, Inside Games, and enable notifications. That's one thing we never say. We don't say subscribe. We don't say turn on the little bell. We really don't plug that very much in this channel, and we really like the channel to, you know, grow a little bit faster than it is. Recommend us to your friends. Maybe you would like to see two people talking about video games that don't necessarily shit on everything all the time. Share us on social media. I don't know, one of those things. Help us out a little bit if you want.
Yeah, we really like doing this content, talking about games, researching the industry and all that. And the more views we get, the more often we'll be able to do it. We have some plans about scaling up that you'll be hearing about very soon. But in the meantime, a tiny little first step is us reminding you that you can help us by sharing this content with somebody that you care about. So spread bravery in video games today.